Bernie Delacruz stood at the window of St. Mary's Hospital's maternity ward, his fingers drumming against the cold metal frame. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot below, marking another hour of waiting. His wife Christina's labor had started 18 hours ago, and the emergency C-section order had come as no surprise to the medical team that had monitored her difficult pregnancy. "She never did listen about those tennis lessons," muttered Dr. Richards, passing behind Bernie with a stack of charts. The older doctor had warned Christina repeatedly about overexertion, but she dismissed his concerns with a casual wave of her hand. Bernie had watched her leave for those lessons 3 times a week, designer tennis outfits perfectly pressed, returning hours later with barely a drop of sweat. He should have known then. The thought crept in unbidden, and Bernie pushed it away. He'd been too busy with the civil engineering firm to notice the signs. The late-night work dinners, the weekend tennis tournaments he was never invited to attend, the way she tilted her phone screen away when messages arrived. He trusted her completely, focused on building their future, expanding his practice to handle larger commercial projects. "Mr. Delacruz?" A nurse in pale blue scrubs appeared at his elbow. "Your wife is out of surgery. Would you like to meet your son?" Bernie nodded, following her down the sterile hallway. The smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils as they approached the nursery. Through the window, he could see rows of newborns, some crying, others sleeping peacefully in their plastic bassinets. "Here he is," the nurse said proudly, lifting a bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect health. Bernie reached for his son, but as the nurse placed the baby in his arms, time seemed to stop. The world narrowed to a single point of focus, the child's face. The distinctive Asian features were unmistakable: almond-shaped eyes, the particular slope of the nose, the skin tones several shades darker than Bernie's Spanish-Filipino heritage would produce. Features that perfectly matched Linwood Haney, Christina's tennis coach. "Sir?" The nurse touched his arm gently. "Are you all right? You've gone quite pale." Bernie looked down at the child. Not his child, and felt ice spread through his veins. Every suspicion he dismissed, every doubt he'd buried, crystallized into perfect clarity. The late tennis lessons, the work dinners, the hidden phone screen, the way Linwood had looked at Christina during the charity gala last spring, his hand lingering too long on her lower back as he guided her to the dance floor. "I'm fine," Bernie said, his voice steady despite the roaring in his ears. He handed the baby back to the nurse with careful precision. "Please tell my wife I stepped out to make some calls." He walked to his car with measured steps, pulled out his phone, and dialed his lawyer's private number. "James? It's Bernie Delacruz. I need you to draw up divorce papers immediately." "Yes, I know it's after hours." "This can't wait." Across town, in his modern glass-walled office, James Chun leaned back in his chair. "Bernie, slow down. What's happened?" "Christina just had your baby." "No," Bernie replied, his voice sharp as a blade. "She just had Linwood Haney's baby. I need those papers by morning." There was a long pause on the line. "Are you certain? This isn't something you can take back." "The baby is clearly half Asian, James. Unless you think I somehow have Chinese ancestors I don't know about, there's only one explanation. I want everything ready before she's discharged. Full documentation of infidelity, fraudulent paternity, the works. I'll have it on your desk first thing tomorrow," James said. "Bernie, I'm sorry." Bernie ended the call and sat in his car, watching the hospital lights flicker on as dusk settled over the city. In his mind, he was already gone, already planning his exit from the life he'd built here. Seattle, maybe, or Portland. Somewhere with enough environmental engineering projects to keep him busy, far enough away to escape the whispers that would follow this revelation. Inside the hospital, Christina was still unconscious from the anesthesia, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to shatter. Down the hall, in the nursery, her son slept peacefully, while his hidden brother remained tucked away in her womb, his existence concealed by technological limitations and medical oversight. The next morning, Dr. Richards was reviewing Christina's post-operative charts when a junior resident burst into his office. "Doctor, you need to see this," she said, holding up a fresh ultrasound. "The patient in 304. Mrs. Delacruz. She's still showing a fetal heartbeat? Dr. Richards stared at the image, his face draining of color. Get her back into surgery. Now. But Bernie was already gone, his office desk cleared, his clients transferred to other partners. He'd left nothing but a letter, delivered by courier to Christina's hospital room. The baby's features tell me everything I need to know. I won't raise another man's child in a marriage built on lies. Don't try to contact me. The divorce papers will arrive through proper channels. Bernie. Christina read the letter through tears, her hand pressed against her still-swollen abdomen, unaware of the second life stirring within. When the doctors rushed in to tell her about the discovered twin, her initial joy twisted into something darker. Mrs. Delacruz, Dr. Richards said, his voice heavy with professional concern, we need to perform another C-section immediately. There's a second baby. Another one? Christina's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, hidden behind his brother in all the previous scans. It's a rare occurrence, but get it out, she snapped. Get it out now. Hours later, as she held her second son, this one bearing Bernie's strong features, Christina made her decision. Her tennis coach, Linwood, hovered awkwardly in the doorway of her hospital room. You should go, she told him, not looking up from the baby. And don't come back. Christina, we should talk about this. About us. Linwood stepped into the room, his confident tennis instructor persona slipping slightly. Now that everything's out in the open, there is no us. Christina cut him off. There never was. You were a mistake. A stupid, selfish mistake that cost me everything. You can't just. I can and I will. Her voice was ice. You have one son. You can send birthday cards if you must, but stay away from us. All of us. Linwood opened his mouth to argue, then closed it at the look in her eyes. He nodded once and left, his tennis shoes squeaking on the hospital floor. Alone with her twins, Christina looked from one face to the other. Michael, with his Asian features that had destroyed her marriage, and Marcus, whose tiny face echoed Bernie's in every line. He doesn't deserve to know, she whispered to Marcus. If he can walk away so easily, he doesn't get to have you. In Seattle, Bernie was already establishing himself in the environmental engineering community. His reputation had preceded him, and firms were eager to snap up a designer known for innovative, sustainable solutions. He threw himself into his work, taking on challenging projects that required all his focus and creativity. The new flood control proposal is impressive, his new partner commented, reviewing Bernie's designs. But you're working yourself too hard. When was the last time you took a break? Bernie looked up from his computer, where complex mathematical models filled the screen. I don't need breaks. I need to work. The partner shrugged and left, already used to Bernie's intense focus and private nature. None of them knew about the wife he'd left behind, or the child that wasn't his. Bernie preferred it that way. He built his new reputation on precision, innovation, and uncompromising standards, both in engineering and in life. Back in California, Christina created her own narrative for the twins. Your father couldn't handle the responsibility, she told them as they grew. He ran away because he was weak. The story became their foundation myth, repeated so often it calcified into truth. She never mentioned that Marcus was Bernie's mirror image, explaining away the differences between the twins as genetic quirks. When Marcus showed an early aptitude for mathematics and structural design, she encouraged it without acknowledging its source. The years passed, and the divide Bernie had created grew deeper. He won awards for his sustainable designs, his name becoming synonymous with environmental innovation in the Pacific Northwest. Each achievement was another brick in the wall between his past and present. Christina raised her boys alone, watching Marcus inherit not just Bernie's features, but his brilliant mind for engineering. She kept her secret buried deep, like a time bomb waiting to explode, never suspecting that her own mortality would eventually force the truth into the light. In their separate worlds, father and son lived parallel lives, their shared DNA expressing itself in matching passions and talents. Bernie designed bridges across rivers, while young Marcus built elaborate structures with his toys. Neither knew the other existed, their connection hidden behind a wall of anger and pride as solid as any of Bernie's concrete foundations. The lie grew roots, spreading through their lives like ivy through stone. It would take another 18 years, and Christina's final confession, before truth could break through those walls. But that was a story for another time. For now, they remained separated by pride, anger, and the weight of unspoken truths. Bernie's colleagues in Seattle sometimes asked why he never remarried, never had children. He would smile politely and change the subject, turning the conversation back to work, to designs, to the solid certainties of engineering principles. In his private moments, he didn't allow himself to wonder about the child he'd walked away from, the child that wasn't his. He'd made his choice with the same precision he applied to his designs, cutting away the compromised structure to build something new, something clean and true. At professional conferences, he became known for his uncompromising standards and innovative solutions. Dela Cruz never settles for less than perfect, they'd say. In his designs or his life, they didn't know how much that perfection had cost him, or what he'd left behind to achieve it. The story of Bernie's departure became local legend in the California engineering community, whispered about at industry events. Some called him cold for leaving a newborn. Others admired his decisive action in the face of betrayal. Bernie ignored it all, focusing on building his new life with the same attention to detail he brought to his designs. You know what they say about Dela Cruz designs? A colleague once commented, built to withstand any storm. Bernie had simply nodded, knowing that some storms leave damage no engineering can repair. But he never regretted his decision, never questioned the choice to excise the cancer of betrayal before it could spread through his life. As Marcus grew into a teenager, his resemblance to Bernie became stark. Christina would sometimes catch herself staring at her son, seeing the ghost of her ex-husband in his serious expression, in the way he approached problems with methodical precision. She watched him excel in mathematics, saw him pore over engineering textbooks with the same intensity Bernie had brought to his work. Each achievement was a reminder of her deception, each award ceremony another moment Bernie should have shared. But pride and anger had calcified into habit, and the truth remained buried under years of carefully constructed lies. Christina built her own successful life, turning her social connections into a thriving interior design business. She dated occasionally but never seriously, keeping potential partners at arm's length. The twins grew up believing their father's abandonment was a simple fact, like gravity or the laws of mathematics. They didn't question the story. Why would they? It was the foundation their lives were built on, as solid as any of the structures Marcus dreamed of designing. Bernie's letter remained locked in Christina's desk drawer, its harsh truth yellowing with age. Sometimes, late at night, she would take it out and read it again, feeling the old anger rise up like bile in her throat. In those moments, she could almost convince herself that keeping Marcus's existence a secret was justice rather than vengeance. But as the years passed, that certainty began to crack, like hairline fractures in a foundation. It would take her own mortality to finally break it completely, but that revelation was still years away. For now, the walls of silence held firm, keeping father and son apart as surely as any physical distance could. The story of Act 1 ends here, with 3 lives divided by choices that can't be unmade. Bernie in Seattle, building monuments to precision and control. Marcus in California, inheriting a legacy he doesn't know exists. And Christina, keeper of a truth that would eventually demand to be told. But that truth, like the hidden twin in those early ultrasounds, waited in the shadows. Its time would come, but not yet. Not until the weight of secrets and silence grew too heavy to bear. The cancer diagnosis came without warning. Christina Dela Cruz sat in her doctor's office, staring at the scan results while Dr. Sarah Martinez explained the advanced stage of pancreatic cancer. The words terminal and months to live echoed in her ears, but her mind was elsewhere, on the lie she'd maintained for 18 years. Mrs. Dela Cruz? Dr. Martinez leaned forward. Do you have someone who can come with you to your appointments? My sons, Christina replied automatically. They're 18 now. The doctor nodded, making notes in her chart. Family support will be crucial during this time. We can discuss treatment options to extend. How long? Christina cut in. Without treatment, 3 months, maybe 4. Christina nodded, her hand unconsciously touching the old letter in her purse. Bernie's goodbye note that she'd carried all these years like a talisman of her bitterness. That's enough time. At home, she found Marcus in his usual spot at the dining room table, engineering journals spread around him. The sight stopped her in the doorway. He sat exactly as Bernie used to, one hand absently running through his hair as he focused on complex diagrams. "Mom?" Marcus looked up, his features, Bernie's features, creasing with concern. "What did the doctor say?" Behind him, Michael entered from the kitchen, his Asian features a constant reminder of her mistakes. The twins were like living photographs of her past, one capturing her greatest betrayal, the other her greatest deception. "Sit down, both of you," she said. "It's not good news." She told them about the cancer first, watching their different reactions. Michael immediately started talking about treatment options, clinical trials, specialists they could consult. Marcus sat quietly, analyzing the problem like one of his engineering challenges, looking for a solution that didn't exist. "There's something else," Christina said, but stopped. Not yet. She couldn't tell Marcus the truth with Michael present. The weight of her deception pressed against her chest, heavier than the cancer growing inside her. The next few weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments and deteriorating health. Christina watched Marcus pore over engineering journals between his hospital visits, his passion for structural design growing stronger each day. Every calculation he solved, every design principle he mastered, was another echo of Bernie. One afternoon, while Michael was at work, Christina called Marcus to her bedroom. Her illness had progressed quickly, leaving her bedridden and weak. The time for truth had come. "Marcus," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to know about your father." Marcus stiffened. The subject of their father had always been taboo, reduced to the simple narrative of abandonment. "Mom, you don't have to." "I do." Christina reached for the envelope she'd prepared, years of documentation carefully preserved. "Your father, Bernie Delacruz, he didn't abandon you. He never knew you existed." Marcus stared at her, uncomprehending. "What?" "When Bernie left, he knew about Michael. The pregnancy was difficult, and the doctors, they missed you in the scans. You were hidden behind your brother." The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. "By the time they found you, Bernie was gone. I was so angry, so hurt by his departure, that I decided to keep you from him. If he could walk away so easily, I told myself he didn't deserve to know about you." She handed him the envelope with shaking hands. "This contains everything: DNA test results, birth records, Bernie's last known whereabouts. He's your biological father, Marcus, not Michael's. Linwood Haney, the tennis coach. He's Michael's father." Marcus opened the envelope, pulling out medical records, photographs, newspaper clippings about Bernie's engineering achievements. His hands shook as he read the DNA test results. "All these years," he said, his voice hollow. "Every time you told us he abandoned his family, I was wrong." Christina's voice cracked. "Bernie was a good man. The affair with Linwood, the lies, those were my failures, not his. My bitterness became a prison for all of us." She grabbed his hand. "You deserve to know him, Marcus. You're so much like him, brilliant with structure and design, just like he was. He's still alive, still designing. I've kept track through engineering journals." Marcus stood abruptly, the papers clutched in his hand. "I need some time." "We don't have much time," Christina reminded him gently. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry." After Marcus left the room, Christina sank back against her pillows. The truth, finally spoken, left a strange emptiness in its wake. She thought of Bernie, wondering if he'd recognize himself in the son he never knew he had. Marcus spent the next week in a daze, alternating between caring for his mother and researching Bernie Delacruz. Each article he found showed another connection. They shared not just features but passions, approaches to problems, ways of thinking. Bernie's innovative environmental engineering solutions filled professional journals and industry publications. When he finally told Michael, his twin's reaction surprised him. "I always wondered," Michael said quietly. "We look nothing alike. And you look exactly like those old photos of Bernie Mom kept hidden. Did you know about Linwood?" Michael nodded. "He sends birthday cards every year. Mom returns them unopened, but I found some once. He respected her wishes to stay away, but he tried to maintain some connection. What are you going to do? Michael asked after a long silence. Marcus looked at the latest engineering journal on his desk, open to an article about Bernie's flood control innovations, the exact field Marcus hoped to study in college. I'm going to find him. The search began in earnest then. Marcus tracked Bernie's career through professional publications while caring for his increasingly frail mother. Each achievement he uncovered felt like a roadmap, showing him not just where Bernie had been, but who he was. He's presenting at a sustainable engineering conference in Portland next month, Marcus told Michael one evening. His new flood control designs, they're revolutionary. He's using principles I've been theorizing about in my own studies. Michael watched his brother with a mix of sadness and understanding. Are you going to go? I have to know him, Marcus said simply. Mom's running out of time and I need to know. Christina declined rapidly over the next few weeks. The cancer spread despite treatment, leaving her confined to hospice care. She spent her lucid moments sharing stories about Bernie with Marcus, small details she'd hoarded all these years. He could solve structural problems in his head, she told Marcus one afternoon, just like you do. He'd see the solution before others even understood the problem. Why did you keep track of him all these years if you hated him so much? Marcus asked. Christina was quiet for a long moment. I never hated him. I hated myself, and it was easier to pretend the anger was directed at him. Every time I saw your gift for engineering emerge, I knew I'd robbed both of you of something precious. She died 2 days later, slipping away quietly in her sleep. At the funeral, Marcus stood between Michael and an empty space that should have been filled by the father he'd never known. The weight of the conference ticket in his pocket felt like a promise. As Marcus prepared for the next phase of his journey, he found himself studying his reflection, seeing Bernie's features in his own face. Soon, he would stand in the back of a lecture hall in Portland, watching the father he'd never known present innovations that mirrored his own dreams. But that part of the story belonged to the future, to Act 3, where bridges between past and present would finally be built. The truth, once hidden like Marcus himself, had finally emerged. Now it remained to be seen what would be built upon its foundation. Michael helped Marcus pack for Portland, both brothers processing their new reality. Will you tell him about Mom? Eventually, Marcus said. First, I just need to know who he is. And who you are. Marcus nodded, carefully folding the DNA test results and birth records. 18 years of stories, and none of them were true. Except maybe one. Which one? That some structures can't be built on broken foundations. Marcus closed his suitcase. Maybe that's why Mom finally told the truth. So whatever comes next would have a solid base. Michael hugged his brother, their different features reflecting their complex heritage. Let me know when you get there. Marcus nodded, picking up his engineering journals. The same ones that had unwittingly connected him to Bernie all these years. The next chapter of their story waited in Portland, but for now, he carried the truth his mother had finally shared. He was Bernie Delacruz's son, and it was time to bridge the gap between past and future. The Portland Convention Center buzzed with activity as engineers from across the country gathered for the Sustainable Infrastructure Summit. Marcus stood at the back of the main lecture hall, his heart pounding as he reviewed the conference schedule for the 10th time. Keynote address: Innovative Flood Control Systems for Climate Change Adaptation. Speaker: Bernard Delacruz, Ph.D. Time: 10 a.m. He'd arrived an hour early, watching attendees file and while clutching the envelope of evidence in his jacket pocket. The DNA test results, birth records, and newspaper clippings felt heavy. 18 years of truth compressed into manila paper. At precisely 10 a.m., Bernie Delacruz stepped onto the stage. Marcus's breath caught. It was like looking into a mirror aged forward 30 years. The same straight-backed posture, the same way of moving with deliberate precision. Bernie had aged well, his hair silver at the temples, but his presence commanding as he began his presentation. Traditional flood control systems fail because they fight against nature, Bernie began, his voice carrying clear authority. Our innovation lies in working with natural water flow patterns while protecting human infrastructure. Marcus watched, mesmerized, as Bernie outlined the same principles he'd been developing in his own college studies. The mathematical models, the structural approaches, it was uncanny how their minds worked along parallel lines. After the presentation, Marcus waited while other attendees asked questions. Bernie handled each query with decisive clarity, showing no patience for poorly thought-out challenges to his design. His responses were sharp, technical, and occasionally cutting when faced with obvious mistakes. If you'd reviewed the stress calculations in Section 4, he told one questioner, you'd see why that failure point isn't possible. Finally, the crowd thinned. Marcus approached the podium, his legs feeling strangely weak. Bernie was gathering his presentation materials, his movements efficient and precise. Mr. Delacruz? Bernie looked up, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Marcus saw the flash of recognition in his father's eyes, not of him specifically, but of the features they shared. My name is Marcus, he continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I'm your son. Mom never told you, but when you left, she was carrying twins. She just told me the truth before she died. Bernie's hands stilled on his papers. His eyes, exact mirrors of Marcus's own, narrowed slightly as they took in every detail of Marcus's face. Twins, he said flatly. Marcus pulled out the envelope, laying the DNA test results on the podium. I was hidden behind Michael in the scans. They found me after you left. Mom, she kept it secret out of anger. She told me everything before the cancer took her. Bernie picked up the DNA results, scanning them with the same focused attention he'd shown his engineering diagrams moments before. His expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened slightly on the paper's edge. When did she die? 2 weeks ago. Marcus swallowed hard. She gave me these records, told me where to find you. Said you were a good man in the end. That her anger had been the prison, not your leaving. Bernie set the paper down with precise movements. Your brother, Michael. He's the one I saw. Marcus nodded. Linwood's son. He knows I'm here. He's trying to build his own relationship with Linwood now. Mom kept him away all these years too. And you're in engineering, environmental systems, flood control. Actually, I've read all your papers. Been following your work without knowing. Marcus gestured at the presentation screen behind them. I've been developing similar theories in my studies. Bernie was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving between the DNA results and Marcus's face. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, professional. I have a meeting with the conference organizers in 10 minutes. After that, I'd like to hear about your theories on flood control systems. There's a coffee shop in the lobby. Marcus recognized the tone, the same one he used when processing complex problems. I'll be there. Their first real conversation lasted 4 hours. Bernie ordered coffee black, just as Marcus did. They spoke initially about engineering, safe territory where their shared passion created a bridge between years of silence. Your mathematical models for water flow, Bernie said, studying Marcus's notebook, they're surprisingly sophisticated for an undergraduate. I see the patterns intuitively, Marcus explained. The numbers just make sense, like a language. Exactly like that. They moved gradually to personal territory. Bernie asked precise questions about Marcus's life, education, goals. He showed neither emotion nor regret about the past, treating it with the same analytical approach he brought to engineering problems. Your mother's decision to hide your existence was calculated for maximum impact, he observed. She always did understand structural weak points. She regretted it at the end. Regret doesn't change structural reality, Bernie replied. But new structures can be built on old foundations, if the engineering is sound. Over the next 5 years, they built their relationship with the same precision they brought to their engineering projects. Bernie reviewed Marcus's college work, offering critiques that pushed him to greater innovation. They began collaborating on projects, their similar minds approaching problems from complementary angles. Their first joint project was a flood control system for a small coastal city. Bernie's experience combined with Marcus's fresh theoretical approaches created something revolutionary. Your water flow calculations here, Bernie said one day, pointing to a complex diagram. They solve a problem I've been working on for a decade. I was building on your previous research, Marcus replied. The solution was hidden in your old papers, like I was hidden in those scans. Bernie's expression didn't change, but he nodded slowly. Some things need time to emerge. Speaking of which, how is your brother handling Linwood? They're finding their way. Michael's working in sports medicine now. Turns out he has Linwood's gift for understanding physical mechanics. But he still comes to all our project presentations. They develop traditions over time. Monthly video calls to review new research. Annual fishing trips where they talked engineering over quiet lakes. Holiday gatherings that gradually expanded to include Michael and later, Marcus's wife and son. Bernie never spoke of regret or what-ifs. He approached their relationship like one of his projects, assessing current conditions, designing appropriate solutions, implementing with precision. He remained the same strong, occasionally ruthless figure in his professional life, known for his uncompromising standards and innovative designs. The industry watched with interest as Bernard Delacruz's work began showing influences of younger theories, while Marcus Delacruz's name started appearing on major projects. Few knew the personal story behind their collaboration. Their masterpiece came near the end of Bernie's career, an earthquake-resistant bridge design that combined Bernie's decades of experience with Marcus's theoretical innovations. They worked on it for 3 years, testing and refining every detail. At the international conference where they presented their work, Bernie sat in the audience while Marcus took the stage. He watched his son command the room with the same authority he'd shown throughout his career, explaining their revolutionary design with precise clarity. The key innovation, Marcus explained to the packed auditorium, lies in how the structure adapts to seismic stress patterns. Traditional designs resist movement. Ours works with it, like water flowing around obstacles. The design won them joint recognition from the international engineering community. The awards ceremony photos showed their matching features clearly, father and son with the same focused eyes and straight-backed posture, holding identical medals. During one of their last conversations, as Bernie's health began to fade, they sat in his Seattle office overlooking the water. The wall behind his desk displayed their shared patent certificates and engineering awards. "Your mother's anger gave you life," Bernie said, studying the bridge designs on his screen. "If she hadn't hidden you, you might never have been born." The structural failure of their relationship created space for new construction. Marcus understood the engineering metaphor, his father's preferred language for emotional topics. Sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in pain. Bernie nodded. Like stress forces in a bridge cable. Properly engineered, they become strength. The end came peacefully. Bernie worked until the last week of his life, reviewing designs and offering critiques from his hospital bed. His final professional act was to sign off on a joint paper with Marcus about earthquake-resistant architecture. At the memorial service, Marcus stood between Michael and his own young son. Bernie Jr., the boy, already showed signs of the family gift, building complex structures with his toys and asking endless questions about how things worked. Michael squeezed his brother's shoulder as they listened to industry leaders praise Bernie's innovations and uncompromising brilliance. No one mentioned the personal stories, the betrayal, the hidden son, the bridges built between past and future. Those belonged to the family alone. After the service, Marcus placed their shared engineering medal on Bernie's headstone. The inscription they'd chosen together caught the afternoon light. "The greatest structures are built on foundations of truth." Bernie Jr. studied the medal with serious eyes. "Dad, will you teach me about bridges like Grandpa taught you?" Marcus smiled, recognizing Bernie's focused expression on his son's face. "Some bridges take time to build, buddy, but they're worth the wait." Michael joined them at the headstone. 3 generations of a complex family united by time and truth. "He never did believe in easy solutions," Michael observed. "No," Marcus agreed. "He believed in correct ones. Everything else was just poor engineering." They left the cemetery together, the medal glinting on Bernie's headstone like a bridge between past and future, its inscription a reminder that some structures transcend the materials that build them. The story began with a betrayal in a hospital room, but it ended with a truth stronger than the lies that birthed it. Bernie's legacy lived on not just in the structures he'd built, but in the principles he'd passed down: precision, innovation, and the understanding that even the deepest divisions could be bridged with proper engineering. In his office at the university, Marcus kept the envelope of evidence his mother had given him, now accompanied by years of photos, project plans, and memories built with the father he'd found. And on his wall hung the first blueprint he and Bernie had worked on together, marked with both their corrections, a physical reminder that some designs take time to perfect. The greatest structures, after all, are built on foundations of truth, and sometimes, those foundations are discovered rather than laid, emerging from the hidden places where life's complexities rest, waiting to be found by those willing to look deeper than the surface. Epilogue. 10 years later. The consequences of truth have a way of spreading like stress fractures through concrete, their patterns only visible with time. 10 years after Bernie Dela Cruz's memorial service, those patterns had become clear. Michael Haney, he'd taken his biological father's surname 5 years ago, stood in the empty tennis center where Linwood had once coached. The facility was being demolished to make way for one of Marcus's innovative sports complexes. Poetic justice, some might say, that Bernie's son's design would replace the site of Christina's betrayal. Feels strange, Linwood said beside him. Time hadn't been kind to the former tennis coach. His affair with Christina had marked the peak of his life, everything after a slow decline. No prestigious coaching positions had materialized. Country clubs had quietly declined his services once the story spread. He'd ended up teaching beginners at public courts, watching younger coaches claim the positions he'd once dreamed of. The new complex will have 10 indoor courts, Michael said, his voice neutral. Their relationship, built late in life, remained professional rather than paternal. State-of-the-art facilities for rehabilitation therapy. Linwood nodded, his once proud posture stooped with age and regret. Your mother would have appreciated the irony. Her tennis lessons leading to this. Mom appreciated very little at the end, Michael replied. The bitterness in Christina's final years had consumed her, her deception becoming a cancer that matched the one in her body. Her choices had cascaded through decades, touching everyone in their orbit. The last time he'd visited her grave, weeds had grown through the cracked concrete of her headstone. No one maintained it. The groundskeeper said years sometimes passed between visitors, a stark contrast to Bernie's well-maintained memorial, where engineers still left tokens of respect, and family gathered regularly to honor his legacy. Did you ever regret it? Michael asked suddenly. The affair, the lies? Linwood's hand trembled as he touched the worn tennis court net. Every day, I lost everything, my reputation, my career. For what? A married woman who saw me as nothing but an escape from her own unhappiness. He laughed bitterly. Bernie Dela Cruz built an engineering empire. I taught backhand to 8-year-olds at the YMCA. Michael studied his biological father, the man his mother had thrown away her marriage for. Linwood's designer tennis clothes had been replaced by discount store attire. His confident swagger had deteriorated into an uncertain shuffle. The annual birthday cards had stopped 5 years ago when he could no longer afford the postage. Across town, in the gleaming headquarters of Dela Cruz Environmental Engineering, Marcus sat in what had once been Bernie's office. The wall of patents and awards had grown, new innovations building on his father's foundations. On his desk, a photo showed 4 generations of engineers, Bernie in his last year, Marcus, Bernie Jr. now in college studying structural engineering, and little Sophia, Marcus's daughter, already showing the family gift for mathematical thinking. The phone rang. Michael, calling from the tennis center. They're starting demolition next week, Michael reported. Linwood came to say goodbye to the place. He's not doing well. Marcus nodded, though his brother couldn't see it. How are you handling it? I've made my peace. He's paid for his choices every day since. Sometimes I think he and Mom deserved each other. Both so focused on what they wanted that they couldn't see what they were destroying. The brothers had discussed this many times over the years. How Christina's deception had poisoned her relationship with both sons in their final years. How her bitterness had isolated her until even Michael's attempts at reconciliation met cold resistance. Sophia asked about her grandmother yesterday, Marcus said. She saw Mom's picture in the family album. What did you tell her? The truth. That she made mistakes that hurt a lot of people and never found a way to make peace with them. That anger can destroy foundations faster than any natural disaster. Michael was quiet for a moment. Bernie would have appreciated that engineering metaphor. They both smiled, remembering their father's way of relating everything to structural principles. The demolition began the following week. Marcus went to watch with Michael, standing beside their shared brother as the walls came down. Linwood had been invited but declined, unable to face the physical destruction of his last connection to his former life. "Did you know," Michael said, watching the wrecking ball swing, "Mom left him her tennis trophies in her will? Some kind of final mockery. They're probably worth something as scrap metal now. It's all he has left." The brothers had chosen different paths after Bernie's death. Marcus had taken over the engineering firm, expanding it into new territories while maintaining Bernie's uncompromising standards. Michael had become a respected sports medicine specialist, turning his understanding of physical mechanics toward healing rather than competition. They'd both married, had children, built lives that honored truth rather than concealment. Michael's daughter showed talent for medicine, while Marcus's children inherited the engineering mind that had defined Bernie's lineage. The impact of Christina and Linwood's choices had rippled outward, touching lives beyond their immediate circle. The tennis students who'd whispered about their coach's scandal, the engineering clients who'd followed Bernie to Seattle, the colleagues who'd watched Marcus and Bernie's relationship unfold through their collaborative projects. Even now, a decade after Bernie's death, industry publications occasionally ran retrospectives about the Dela Cruz engineering dynasty. They focused on the innovations, the awards, the revolutionary designs. Few knew the personal story, how betrayal had led to discovery, how deception had ultimately revealed deeper truths. Christina's final years had been marked by increasing isolation. Her interior design business had faltered as clients quietly took their projects elsewhere. Society friends had drifted away, uncomfortable with her bitterness. Even Michael's attempts to maintain a connection had met with cold resistance. "I gave up everything for you," she told Michael during one of their last conversations. "My marriage, my reputation, my chance at happiness." "No, Mom," Michael had replied. "You gave those up for yourself, for what you wanted in the moment. We were just collateral damage in your choices." She died alone in her small apartment, surrounded by aging tennis trophies and yellowing photos of her glory days. The contrast with Bernie's passing, celebrated by industry leaders, mourned by family, honored by generations of engineers, couldn't have been starker. Linwood's decline had been equally dramatic. The tennis world had no place for a coach known for seducing married students. His technique might have been excellent, but country clubs and private schools wouldn't risk their reputations. He'd moved between increasingly modest facilities, his dreams of coaching champions replaced by endless beginner lessons. "Your mother," he told Michael once, "she promised we'd build something special together, a future. Instead, we destroyed everything we touched." The demolition crew worked efficiently, erasing the tennis center where it had all begun. In its place would rise a modern sports complex designed by Marcus's firm, its innovative architecture incorporating Bernie's principles of working with natural forces rather than against them. "Did you ever wonder," Michael asked as they watched, "what would have happened if Mom had told Bernie about you right away?" Marcus considered this, analyzing it like one of his engineering problems. The structure was already compromised. Her deception about you, about Linwood, telling the truth about me wouldn't have repaired that damage. Sometimes demolition is the only way forward. They stood in silence as the last wall fell. Soon, construction would begin on the new complex. Marcus's design included a memorial garden, though not to Christina or Linwood. Instead, it would honor Bernie's engineering principles, working with nature, building on truth, creating structures that stood the test of time. In the years since Bernie's death, his approach had been validated repeatedly. His flood control systems had saved communities. His environmental designs had changed industry standards. Through Marcus, his innovations continued to evolve and improve. The brothers drove together to Bernie's grave after the demolition. The headstone remained pristine, the engineering metal still gleaming. Bernie Jr. was there, working on college engineering calculations beside the grave. "Uncle Michael," he jumped up to greet them. "I've been studying grandfather's original flood control designs. The mathematical elegance is incredible." Michael hugged his nephew, seeing echoes of Bernie in the young man's focused expression. The family gift had passed cleanly through the generations, untainted by the lies that had marked its discovery. Later that evening, At Marcus's home, the extended family gathered for their monthly dinner. These gatherings had become tradition after Bernie's death, a way to maintain the connections he'd helped forge in his final years. Bernie Jr. excitedly showed off his latest engineering projects. Sophia demonstrated a structural principle using her building blocks. Michael's daughter discussed her medical school applications. The room buzzed with the energy of passionate minds pursuing truth in their chosen fields. "Dad," Sophia asked Marcus suddenly, "why don't we ever visit grandmother's grave?" The room quieted. Marcus exchanged glances with Michael before answering. "Because graves are structures too," he said, using the language their grandfather had taught them. "They need maintenance, care, regular attention. Your grandmother? She built walls instead of bridges. In the end, those walls isolated her from everyone who might have maintained her memory." "Like poor engineering?" Sophia suggested. "Exactly. The greatest structure are built on foundations of truth." The whole family finished together, smiling at the familiar phrase. As the evening wound down, Marcus and Michael stood on the balcony, overlooking the city their father had helped shape. Bernie's innovations were visible in the skyline. Sustainable buildings, flood control systems, bridges that seemed to float on air. "I saw Linwood at the grocery store last week," Michael said quietly. "He was counting change to buy generic bread." Marcus nodded. "Choices have consequences. Dad taught us that about engineering. Turns out it applies to life too." The brothers stood in comfortable silence, each reflecting on the paths that had led them here. Their mother's deception, meant to hurt Bernie, had instead given Marcus a chance at life. Linwood's betrayal, intended to steal happiness, had left him with nothing but regrets. Bernie's approach, facing truth head-on, building carefully on solid foundations, had created lasting legacy. His grandchildren would carry forward not just his engineering principles, but his understanding that integrity was the strongest building material of all. The demolition of the tennis center marked the final physical remnant of Christina and Linwood's choices, but the lessons of their story continued through the generations. Every time Marcus designed a new structure, every time Michael healed a patient, every time their children pursued truth in their own ways, they honored the father who had shown them how to build bridges across life's deepest divides. The sun set over the city, casting long shadows through the innovative buildings that marked Bernie's legacy. Tomorrow, construction would begin on the new sports complex. The cycle of destruction and creation would continue, guided by the principles Bernie had lived by. Work with natural forces, build on truth, create structures that stand the test of time. In the end, that was the real legacy. Not just the physical structures or engineering innovations, but the understanding that every choice, every action, every relationship needed solid foundations to survive. Christina and Linwood had built on lies, and time had eroded everything they created. Bernie had built on truth, and his work continued to rise, reaching toward the future through the generations that followed. The greatest structures, after all, are built on foundations of truth.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.